Show, the guys chat with author Micah Hanks of theGralianReport.com.
Welcome back to the Grimerica Show. This week we're going to have Micah Hanks on the program, but first let me get to my co-host, Graham. How's it going, Graham?
I'm doing excellent.
Right on. Anything new? I know you noticed you posted those orb videos on the site.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about those for sure.
Yeah, those are pretty cool. Actually, speaking of the website, it's getting there. It's definitely a work in progress, but I find it's looking a little better today than it has been for a while. We've added a link so you can just, if you're having trouble, you can just go to Grimerica.com and click on the iTunes link now. We've also got a couple new bloggers. Well, we've always had Scattering Sky Spirits. We've had her blogging for us for a little while, but she just had a new post this week, so I suggest you guys come on down and check it out. And then we've got Seeking Paradigm. He's a new one. His first one is a pretty cool post about how he thinks his Xbox is spying on him. So
That should be good.
yeah, I read about half of it, but I'm gonna finish it up when we're done here. So it's kind of weird. We had quite a few technical gremlins with this interview. I don't know if it's MIBs or what the fuck's going on there. What do you think about that, Graham?
I don't know. I think the Halos made it all the way from the bunker to the igloo.
Yeah, those motherfuckers, eh? We had a hell of a time recording this interview. Actually, in the end, we had to get Micah to record it for us and send it to us. But so hopefully we can get those problems. I've never had problems like that before, so I don't know. Something's up.
Yeah,
Someone's
you had two computers going to try it out. Luckily now I've got a backup recording program, so if that ever happens again, hopefully I can step in and help out a bit. I felt a bit useless there. I got disconnected quite a few times too, so I'm hardwired in now also, so that should help.
Yeah, so hopefully, well, like I said, it was all going to be a work in progress. But we're getting there one step at a time. Once again, the website's www.grimerica.com or grimerica.ca. You can now get right to the iTunes page just by typing www.grimerica.ca/iTunes. And you can email us at feedback@grimerica.ca. So we've definitely been noticing some interest from all over the world, so that's pretty exciting. Getting nice to hear people
Yeah,
downloading.
that's very exciting. We've had some positive feedback too from friends and people we don't know.
Yeah, so that's good. We'll just keep them coming. So let's get down to your orb videos. You want to tell us the story around which one do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the one from the Cathedral Vortex first. That's the one I took. So I was down in Arizona for the UFO Congress, and I was in Sedona for a couple days prior, and I climbed up to the Cathedral Vortex there, did that little hike up there, and I was meditating up there for a little bit, just taking pictures and videos of the surroundings. When I got back home, I hadn't really looked at any videos or pictures. I just take them all and then I don't really go through them all. And I was showing a friend them, and we were looking at the video, and it was kind of the first time I'd really looked at it. And she says, "Oh, did you see that orb there?" And I said, "Oh, what are you talking about? There's no orb there." I go, "That must have been the sun shining or something." And I'm continuing on. She goes, "No, go back and look at it." So I scroll back, and sure enough, this little thing bounces through the bottom of the screen. I was like, "Holy shit! Yeah, you're right. There is something there." So I mean, I don't know what that is, what it could be. Maybe it's the light reflecting on something in the camera, but definitely the camera the camera movement doesn't seem to match the orb going through the bottom of the screen. So, anyways, that's that one. And the interesting thing was I was down there in Arizona with an orb video from my friend. Now that's the other one that's on the website. I think it's called we put amazing orb video at my friend's condo, and that was after his sweat lodge experience. And he was videotaping his little dog trying to jump up on the couch, and he started seeing he saw these orbs because he exclaimed something like, "Oh my god!" And then he mentioned something about his spirit guides and would they light it up a bit. And then so I mean, you could tell there's something going on. These orbs are floating around, and I don't think those are dust particles or anything like that. And then about 2 minutes and 11 seconds in, around there, one flies like pretty much right through the screen. I don't know. It looks pretty amazing to me. I'm not really an orb phenomena guy. Like I've known about it. I haven't really been following it. I mean, I'm interested in it, just like I'm interested in a lot of these phenomena. Um, and I know that the skeptics would say, "Oh, it's dust particles or lens flares or whatever." But the way I think of that is similar to what the skeptics would say about any other of these phenomena. Like they seem to paint the whole phenomena with a broad brush, right? Like the B-2 stealth bomber sightings are, explain all the UFO sightings out there, that kind of thing, right? Well, I don't think dust particles explain all the orb sightings out there. In fact, there's a lot of personal accounts of people visually seeing them. So it's not just stuff that gets taken on photographs or videos. So when I was down at the UFO Congress, I was watching a lecture, and they were talking about guys after a sweat lodge following these orbs around in the forest. So they're actually physically seeing orbs in the forest. So I guess part of the native legend is that they are spirit guides, or these spirits that are with the people in the sweat lodge, and then you can actually see them afterwards. So that kind of correlated with my friend's story about how he finished his sweat lodge and then videotaped those orbs in his condo. So take a look. It is fascinating. I'd love to hear what people think about that.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I like them both. They're, I don't know, the one in your buddy's condo there. I think there's a lot more going on in the background and shit than, I think it's just like the one little single spot. There's an orb in the Phoenix one, right? Or not Phoenix, Sedona.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the other one, like if you look into the background, you can kind of see them shooting out all over the place. So
yeah.
who knows? I don't know much about orbs myself, but it's definitely pretty cool. So I haven't heard anything from Mars One yet, so I'm still gonna take their silence as scam. I wonder, I should look around and see if they've done any interviews with anyone else. I haven't I haven't heard of anything, but who knows? I'm gonna look right now.
Yeah, take a look. I don't know. I'm not as inclined to be willing to go after I heard the guys talking on the Mysterious Universe about some of the what were those people they were testing? There's
Yeah, I don't know. There is an interview here. It's only text, but I'll read it after. I'll have more next week. I'm still saying it's a scam. But anyway, so Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss came in.
wow. Yeah, I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. It's tough to put down once you get into it. I got pretty good dent in it last night, and it's pretty good, shaping up to be a gooder.
That's good.
But it's a pretty intimidating 500 pages, but it reads pretty good for sure. How are you making out with Stanley Krippner's book? Stanley's
Uh,
coming on in about a week and a half, I think.
the Voice of Rolling Thunder.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's going pretty good. It's a little bit of a. I haven't had too much time to read it, but I can tell that's going to be a good one too, and that's going to be one I'm going to want to pass on to some friends of mine, especially friends in the kind of like native energy healing type stuff.
what's the kind of outline of it so far? Was there like a prologue or anything that kind of?
Yeah, I was talking about the history of Rolling Thunder and what was going on with him and Stanley Krippner and the family and that back in the like 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to Stanley Krippner. He's coming on June 11th, so yeah, he should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
He's been around a long time and experienced an awful lot of things down the way. So
And we also have Robbie Graham coming up, I hope. I can't wait to chat with him. He's the Silver Screen Saucers guy. We had just happened to mention him actually in our first two episodes. Just a coincidence, and he wants to come on. He was on Open Minds episode 44 of Spacing Out, actually. That was a really good one. I've heard him a few times, and it's just, I don't know, it's a fascinating subject.
yeah, he's got a real cool website. Everyone should take a peek at it. It's www.silverscreensaucers.com, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really. I was on there the other day, and it's just I could spend an afternoon on there, no problem.
Oh, yeah.
He was talking about the new Will Smith movie there, After Earth. I think that came out last night. I
Oh,
wonder if it's worth seeing. Will Smith is usually pretty good,
yeah.
but other than that, I can't wait to talk to him. That'll be our first overseas interview.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so that should be fairly exciting. But I suppose on to the man of the hour, Mr. Micah Hanks. You can find him at thegralienreport.com. That's gralienreport.com. He's got his own podcast. The Gralien Report comes out every Tuesday. You can just watch live on his website now too, which is pretty cool. And he's got a chat room. So definitely one of our friends in the industry. That's for sure. Hey, Graham.
Yeah, and he wrote a couple of books, right? Magic, Mysticism, and the Molecule, and now the UFO Singularity. And he was also co-organizer of the conference that we met him at, the Paradigm Symposium 2012 and 2013.
Yeah, which kind of, that conference is sort of the thing that got this whole ball rolling in a roundabout way. So
yeah,
pretty funny how quick things can happen sometimes.
Yeah.
I read Magic, Mysticism, and the Molecule. It's a pretty good book. I like. There's some cool stuff on psychomantiums and shit like that just blows my mind.
Yeah, I should. You'll have to pass that on to me.
Yeah, I've been thinking about trying to make my own sometime, or like they're talking about some sort of thing that like sends a magnetic field. You put your face into it and shit. It sounds crazy, man. I should tell Micah to bring that to Paradigm Symposium.
Yeah.
So, and then UFO Singularity. We're going to talk about that book a little bit in the interview, but that was just a great read. I just finished it. I finished it about 15 or 20 minutes before the interview was supposed to fire up. But the interview itself I think we started probably an hour and a half or 2 hours late by the time we had everything figured out. So thanks a lot to Micah for being so patient with us.
Yeah, another guy we might have on is Caleb Hanks, Micah's brother, too.
Yeah, I was actually tweeting back and forth with him the other day, and he's interested, so it's just a matter of squeezing him into what is turning out to be a busier and busier schedule.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get to everyone eventually, that's for sure. There's definitely no shortage of people to talk to, that's for sure. Speaking of Paradigm Symposium, I can't wait to go to this year's. Hopefully everything works out there and we can go down and see some old friends.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, now we'll have to get Ben and Aaron on eventually here. Hopefully maybe we can get in touch with them and they'll come on the show.
Ben and Aaron are the hosts of Mysterious Universe.
Yeah. I think they're coming to the Paradigm Symposium again this year. So
yeah, probably. Yeah,
it'll be a big reunion tour.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see RPG again too. I think I talked to Red Pill and he's gonna come on before the Krippner interview with us.
Oh, okay, that's great. Yeah. Can't wait to chat with him again. Alrighty, well I guess that means we should get into the interview or the chat with Micah.
Yeah, we might as well take a quick break. We had, like I say, there's a couple spots where you might notice some technical difficulties. Just roll right through them, and we'll be back after the interview. Okay, guys, welcome back to Grimerica. This week, with me, as always, we have Graham. How's it going, Graham?
I'm doing okay.
Pretty excited. We got Micah Hanks on board tonight. We're thrilled to have you, Micah. How you been?
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, guys. Hope you guys are doing good.
Yeah, I actually just finished your book about, well, I guess it's been a couple hours now, thanks to the technical gremlins. But I finished the last 2 chapters at about 5 o'clock my time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed them, because I sent them direct to you with cosmic love. There you go.
Yeah, it was great. You know, I really liked your first book, Magic, Mysticism, and the Molecule, but this one really piqued me big time. Not to say the other one wasn't great, but this one blew me away. Especially the last half is great.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's funny because I've had a lot of people, who said, we kind of thought you had been pinned as a as a consciousness researcher, and then you come out with this book, The UFO Singularity, and really just had everybody going, oh, wow, this guy knows UFOs just as well. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I think that really, to date, at very least, the UFO Singularity is kind of my seminal research, my seminal book. But it's really just an ongoing progression in a multitude of interests that I have, and interests that I think are all kind of interconnected in so many different varieties of ways, whether it has to do with human consciousness or our technological progression as a species, evolution, or if you want to call it conscious evolution. All these things I think are interrelated. And so really it's just the ongoing accumulation of weirdness and my interpretation of the lesser-known aspects of human existence, whether it be magic, mysticism, molecule, or the UFO singularity. It's all those things combined, and the nature of the human experience underlying all of it.
Yeah, I was saying on our last podcast that a lot of times when I listen to authors on podcasts or on radio shows, and sometimes I feel like I don't need to read their books, and I kind of avoid it. But with yours, I was so glad I read it. It felt like you really picked all my ideas and my thoughts about ufology out and just like succinctly put it on paper. It really did feel like you covered a lot of the views that I have on the subject.
Well, that's because as a post-singularity intelligence in my own right, what I actually managed to do is utilize synthetic telepathy to read your mind. Yeah, and then, Graham, I took your ideas and I put them down on the printed page. So I have you and you alone to thank for all of it.
Very good.
Nice work, Graham.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
He did a great job with my book, didn't he?
No doubt.
I liked the one. I did have a question about USOs. We were just talking on our first go at this podcast about Ivan Sanderson's book, and I did notice that USOs really wasn't in there as a subject of ufology, and I wondered if that was a conscious decision.
Wait. While we're on the second to USOs.
Yeah, okay. Call it.
I was listening to Gralien last night, and I still am going to stand by that Shag Harbour and what's his name?
Richard French.
I still think that's the same place, because does it say St. John, Newfoundland, or does it just say St. John?
Well, here's what we know. Okay, for those who aren't aware of what we're talking about, retired Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was an individual who had recently at the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure had given testimony about having observed 2 UFOs underwater. He said that it was a multiple witness encounter and that many people had been able to observe 2 UFOs enter, I guess the ocean just shortly off the coast of Newfoundland, and that these UFOs had been performing some kind of a maintenance routine where he said these aliens were actually outside the craft underwater and performing some sort of like maintenance, on these UFOs, presumably disc-shaped. I don't know that information was necessarily divulged. French claimed that he'd observed the 2 craft. And so I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying, well, this sounds an awful lot like the Shag Harbour UFO incident. Now, I feel that it's not necessarily the case that we're talking about 2 cases that are one and the same. And the reason why is because if we are to understand correctly what the Huffington Post had reported that French had said, he had claimed that he had witnessed something in 1952, or at very least, that's the specific year that the Huffington Post article puts out, but at very least we understand that French had believed that this had taken place during the 1950s sometime. And they'd observed off the coast of St. John's, which is the capital of Newfoundland, on the east coast of Newfoundland, he had observed 2 UFOs. Again, I believe, according to his testimony, we were given the impression that this took place during daylight, and that he'd said that the water was clear enough that he could see down beneath the water, and that he could see these 2 UFO craft being operated on by what looked like modern alien greys. Well, this is a pretty extraordinary story, and so it was so extraordinary that I decided to try and dig into what French was talking about. And so based on the information that was related in the Huffington Post article, the year 1952 was the first year I began with, and I began to look through the Project Blue Book files that were actually released and are available for people to actually download and read at bluebookarchive.org. You know, Project Blue Book was a United States Air Force project during which there were actual official inquiries carried out into the UFO, the nature of the UFO enigma, and those files were eventually released to the public and people have access to them. And there have been a number of books that have been published that kind of filtered the good stuff from the Blue Book files down into kind of a readable format and everything. They were published. One edition was edited by Brad Steiger, the researcher of all different kinds of Forteana. So basically, going back through the 1952 files, I found about 5 reports. 2 of them were identical, and so that really narrows it down to 4. 3 of them all took place on the west coast of Newfoundland near a town called Stephenville, which is interesting because there was a big UFO flap in a town called Stephenville in Texas a number of years ago. But the reason that there would be a lot of UFO reports from the 1950s and 60s emanating from Stephenville, Newfoundland, is because that was the site of a U.S. Air Force base at the time. I think that the property had been purchased in maybe 1941, and it was kept until 1949 when the Canadian government, as I understand it, had actually purchased the land. But the United States Air Force, which had a base there, was able to continue operating that until a few years later, probably around 1956 or 57. If I remember correctly. So it's only natural, it stands to reason at very least, that UFO reports are going to emanate from near where an Air Force base had been positioned anyway, because people are looking up, they have personnel on duty, and they also have the kind of technology via radar. They've got air traffic control towers and the like. They have a variety of different kinds of technological implementations that will make UFO watching more formidable. Whereas on the East Coast, there wasn't all that. But the East Coast is where St. John's is, and there was only one UFO report from the year of 1952 that seemed to match anywhere near the West Coast, or rather the East Coast of Newfoundland, and that incident took place at a location that was about 3 hours drive time from St. John's, so that one didn't even seem to match either. Now, when we talk about where St. John's, which is what specifically, based on the information in the Huffington Post article that cited Richard French's testimony on this incident, not only did he mention 1952, and I even thought to myself, maybe 1952 wasn't the right year. Maybe it wasn't even during the 1950s. But what we know is that he said that this incident that he observed, where he saw 2 submerged UFO craft underwater performing some sort of a maintenance routine of some sort, he said this took place off the coast of Newfoundland near St. John's. Guys, as the crow flies, that is no less than 600 miles away, probably more, from Shag Harbour. And the Shag Harbour incident, rather than taking place in the 1950s at any time, it took place in 1967.
Yeah.
And that was the same year that Richard French was mentioned in John Keel's Mothman Prophecies, attending a woman's house and trying to drink a bowl of Jell-O that was handed to him because he complained of having stomach problems. So for those who say that there's a similarity to an inside Navy account of the Shag Harbour incident, I say, well, but, it may indeed be the case, but if that's the case, we've been given a lot of bad information, and that information that was bad would have to be the date, the location, and frankly, a lot having to do with Lieutenant Richard Colonel's supposed position with the Air Force at the time, which in the 1950s would not have been Lieutenant Colonel. In fact, by 1967, as mentioned by John Keel, he was still going by, I believe he was just going by Lieutenant Richard French, so he hadn't even been upgraded. As a matter of fact, actually, he wasn't lieutenant. I'm sorry, he was Major Richard French, and that's how he introduced himself in May of 1967 as related in John Keel's Mothman Prophecies. So at the time, he wasn't even a lieutenant colonel, which was one step above major. He was still introducing himself as Major Richard French. So none of the aspects of the 2 stories add up, and it's easy for people to kind of peripherally look at these 2 cases and say, well, it sounds a little like Shag Harbour. That's probably what he was talking about. If he really was a Blue Book debunker, and if he claimed to have witnessed UFO craft submerged off the coast of Newfoundland, Shag Harbour, or any place, the 2 stories, if we're to take him seriously, have to match up. And it presently, based on my research and what I've been able to find based on others' research, none of it adds up. So, frankly, I'm still very skeptical of Richard French. But what we do know is that at very least by 1967, which was the year that the Shag Harbour incident took place, we do know that John Keel had already encountered cases where people were claiming they were having encounters with a guy calling himself Richard French. And if it had been Shag Harbour that he had been involved with, we have to also take into consideration the possibility that A, he got the date wrong, or B, the wrong date was given to or reported by the Huffington Post. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
See, now I'll give you a C, is that French is still he's just trying to fuck over Canada's best UFO story. He's disinformationing us.
No, actually, okay, Darren, you're totally right. I've thought about that too, because how better to instill confusion amidst the community than to be a former Project Blue Book. Literally, what he said he did was he went out there and he essentially dumbed down the reports and was a debunker. So how better to continue perpetrating disinformation than to go out there and, 40 years later, continue to offer disinformation? Maybe he's still just doing his job.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because I've got an affinity kind of for Shag Harbour. That's one of my favorite cases.
Oh, it's incredible. And what's so cool is that we were talking about USOs earlier, unidentified submerged objects. I've heard the acronym switched around a bit, underwater submerged objects, different things like that. But the Shag Harbour incident, after the object was allegedly seen crashing into the ocean, some accounts actually detail how the object that entered Shag Harbour was also tracked on radar, and then that there was indeed a second object that joined it. So, yeah, there are, again, I'll admit that there are similarities to what Richard French has said, but I think it's interesting because there's a lot of USO-type activity that's related to the Shag Harbour incident. And furthermore, I think that because of the similarity between the two, Antonio Huneus of Open Minds had been one of the very individuals who had said, I believe Graham and I both got to catch up with him a bit out there in February in Arizona, but Antonio has questioned whether Richard French may be a legitimate individual whose interest in and knowledge of UFO reports from over the years has not maybe colored his own recollection of encounters and experiences that he's had maybe in his old age, having come, to understand a lot about ufology and to have a general knowledge of a lot of the better cases. Maybe he took aspects from the case at Shag Harbour, and maybe he integrated that into his own quote-unquote, I'm putting the air quotes up, recollections, if you will. So there's so many levels of things that could be completely innocent, but nonetheless could still be effectively misinformation. And so with regard to Richard French, I don't think we'll ever really know the truth. But the Shag Harbour incident, on the other hand, nonetheless remains one of the most fascinating cases of both UFO and USO activity. There was even a Russian submarine involved in that, and an intercept mission between I guess what it would have technically, I guess it would have been the military officers involved, the naval teams that were involved in the dive, and then of course eventually an intercept mission with a Russian submarine, which many have asserted ended up being kind of a distraction from the dive operation involving what they believe was a crashed or submerged object there at Shag Harbour. So yeah, that's a really good one, and people, if they want a general idea about what the Shag Harbour incident entails, they can get on Wikipedia and just do a search for the Shag Harbour UFO incident. It's just how it's spelled, S-H-A-G, Shag Harbour. Shag, baby, yeah.
Yeah. Or,
didn't French also say that it was 200 feet down? Like,
no, it was only. Oh yeah, did he?
Well, I think he said it was 200 feet down, and he could see clearly through the water. I mean, has anybody tried on the East Coast to see any further down than 10 feet?
I think it was 25 feet.
It seems to me that the water was
sure?
not. Okay. Yeah, it seems to me that the water was not very deep. But again, that story. I mean, I'm sorry. Even if the water was 10 feet deep, him saying that he was. I mean, where was he in proximity to? I mean, even to be able to see these UFOs being operated on at a depth of 10 or 20 feet, I mean, presumably you'd have to be right over them. So was he in a boat? Was he standing on a pier? How was Richard French able to look into the water and see aliens operating on a craft underwater? I mean, there's so many aspects of the story that just sound absolutely absurd to me. Richard French, to my knowledge, never said that he had been a part of a Navy dive team that had gone down there and helped these aliens or had been close enough to see them. Now, what's interesting is that in relation to unidentified submerged objects, or USOs, The Russian Navy released their documents on UFO phenomenon a few years ago. And what they'd said was that more than 50% of all their encounters with UFO craft took place underwater. Now, part of me wants to say, no shit, Sherlock, because, I mean, come on, they're the Navy. And so they're going to be not always underwater, but I mean, you'd have to say, I mean, come on, what other defense organization, from government to government is going to carry out, if not most of, at least, a good portion of their military operations underwater. Now, all kidding aside, sure, it seems that a naval organization would have a lot of UFO encounters that took place underwater if these things are capable of going underwater, and that seems to be the portion of this that's no dice. But what's interesting is that in the actual reports that they detail, some of the things that they said were just absolutely phenomenal. Lake Baikal, for instance, is the largest landlocked lake anywhere in Russia. And the Russian Navy carries out a lot of its diving operations there because of the fact that it's a large landlocked lake. In their Russian naval documents pertaining to UFO and USO phenomenon, what they had talked about experiencing at Lake Baikal had been that they had, during a routine dive training mission at a particular depth of a few hundred feet underwater, had apparently seen bright flashes and all different kinds of things happening. In another instance, they had seen what looked like diminutive humanoids without diving suits, with silvery kind of like spandex-looking suits, and that they were at this incredible depth of several hundred feet under the surface of Lake Baikal. The Russian dive team never indicated the cause of death. All they say is that there were deaths that resulted as the divers attempted to pursue these diminutive humanoid beings and try and find out who they had been or what they were doing. And so, all this had been allegedly disclosed in the Russian documentation. And I have a friend who had been former, NSA, and he'd worked with different organizations and things many, many, many years ago. And so what his primary position was is he had been a Russian linguist. And so this individual, I'd asked him, I'd said, could you try and find those documents and literally just look at what is being said and tell me if, in English language, it really is what the American tabloids, and I say tabloids in the old sense of the word, because a lot of different news agencies were carrying this story, not just the Weekly World News, things like that. But I was interested enough to try and find out if it was a legitimate report and not just something that was made up, or not something that the English version of the Pravda news source out of Russia maybe was releasing, because you have to take a lot of what comes out of Russia with a grain of salt. And surprising.
See, now I come from the angle that I don't think we really do have to take what comes out of Russia with so much salt. I think that's part of kind of the media making it easy not to trust Russia.
Well, you could look at it both ways, but I think that for me, the way that I would hope to go about this, actually, the only way that we could truly know is to learn the Russian language and go read it for ourselves. But I've relied on a lot of different researchers over the years. If it's something in the Spanish language, Red Pill Junkie, of course, of Daily Grail, Grailian Report, Intrepid Mag, and now, as I understand, Mysterious Universe and Grimerica as well during the podcasts. But yeah, Red Pill Junkie, of course, being a man of Spanish-speaking lineage, but also Javier Ortega of Ghost Theory. And, when it comes to Russian linguists, I've got a number of those who I've worked with over the years just as well. I've got people who speak Portuguese, and people who, have mastery of languages that include French and other languages, and even just really the study of language, and even, the study of historical Indo-European proto-language and things like that. I mean, I've got a lot of people in the academia who never would come forward in public forums and talk about this sort of thing, and certainly would never ever give their names out, but who work directly with me because they recognize that for whatever reason they feel that what I do is of merit. And so I think that a lot of researchers like me have contacts like that. I have my own little network, and these are just contacts I've built up over the years. So I go to these people, and when someone says the Russian Navy has released their documents, I try and get somebody out there and say, look, can we find those documents, and if they're accessible, can we download them and read them and see what they actually said, and not just what the news says? But again, how do you know unless you can speak that language yourself? Sometimes those language barriers are more crippling, I think, than, especially in Western culture, than we tend to recognize.
Well, English is slowly taking over. Maybe Star Trek got that one right too. We'll all be speaking English in a couple hundred years.
There you go. That's what it's going to be. We're all going to be speaking English.
That's one thing I really, I respect people like Red Pill Junkie and folks like him that can speak multiple languages and do it so well. Like, I can speak a little French. Like, if I was stuck in France or something, I could probably get myself some chow in a hotel room.
Right.
But other than that, I have a real problem trying to pick up foreign tongues.
I have the same issue. I'm more well-versed in Spanish language than anything. And second to that, French only because I tried to learn, but I'm no good at all at French. And it's such a beautiful language not to be any good at. But, that's the thing is that, a colleague of mine years ago turned me on to not an article, it's actually an essay published in book form by a researcher named Ernst Cassirer called Language and Myth, which essentially divulges the idea that our very concepts of reality as humans may be intricately connected to the symbolism that we append to words that we create, and that language in itself could literally serve almost as an intermediary between what we perceive as the real world and how our brain interprets it, which comes to a fundamentally interesting concept that I think that we have to discuss, which is that we humans think we understand everything. It reminds me of something that Dennis McKenna once said, that he and a number of individuals had taken ayahuasca, the famous Usaaagi tea that is brewed in the South American Amazon, and apparently, of course, certain varieties of ayahuasca are orally active because of DMT combined with monoamine oxidase A inhibitors that are found in the Liana Banisteriopsis caapi plant, which is the common ingredient that's contained in all these different varieties. And while Dennis and his colleagues were essentially tripping on ayahuasca, they were basically transformed into water molecules and brought through a great big plant and allowed to experience photosynthesis. And as they were coming out of the experience, Dennis said that they heard a voice say, "You monkeys only think you're in charge," as though the spirit.
I'm actually waiting on his book in the mail right now. I can't wait till it gets here.
Well, I'll tell you, I hope you guys have a chance to talk with Dennis McKenna. Of course, his brother Terrence, the late Terrence McKenna, wrote the book Food of the Gods, which was just an absolutely innovative work in this field, which, Dennis and Terrence's work as ethnobotanists was very instrumental in my own research, which began to kind of contribute to at least one aspect of the three portions that comprise Magic, Mysticism, and the Molecule, my first book. I've always had a very sincere interest in entheogens and ethnobotany, or entheobotany even, the study of entheogens, or God-releasing plants. But the reason I bring all that up is because, again, I think a lot of our perception of reality is rooted in a very tragically anthropomorphized viewpoint. And sometimes I think that we have to try and escape from the idea that humans are the supreme be-all, end-all, and that human perception is going to allow us a full understanding of the known universe. Reality, as perceived by humans, could be very different from the universe that actually exists out there, and there could very well be aspects of the known universe, or the unknown universe in this instance, that exist outside the bounds of human perception, and we have to accept that as a possibility. We have to take all these things into consideration and wonder as to whether alien life could exist that literally operates on a level or a dimensional space or a level of existence or perception that literally exceeds the capabilities of humans' physical ability to perceive. We have to think about all these kinds of things. We have to think about whether there could be life forms here on planet Earth that operate intelligently in such capacities that evade human perception, just like plants might do. And as was apparently indicated to Dennis and Terrence McKenna. So all those things should be taken into consideration.
Have you ever heard of psychedelic? What's it called? Psychedelic Salon?
Psychedelic Salon. I have not. No.
It's a podcast. You can search it in iTunes, and it's just like every week they release just lectures from this. Like every second one is Terrence McKenna, and fucking some of them just blow my mind. We've got Dennis McKenna coming on the beginning of July.
Oh, that'll be fantastic, man. I'll have to check that out. So it's Psychedelic Salon, you said?
Yeah, Psychedelic Salon. Yeah, tons of Terrence McKenna lectures. That guy he was so far ahead of his time.
Oh, totally. Are you guys familiar with his book, Food of the Gods?
I haven't read it yet, but I'm planning on it. I've been reading a lot lately about his stoned ape theory.
Yeah, the stone.
And I think I'm going to order his book. I when I was going, I had such a hard time finding, what's it called? The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss.
I love the titles,
I was having such a hard time finding it in Canada. And then I finally found it on this one website, and, they had if I bought 4, I got one of them for free. And so I had all of these books picked out, but in the end, reality kicked in and I could only order the one. But I definitely want to read him. His stoned ape theory absolutely fascinates me. It made me want to go on a mushroom trip this summer, I'm pretty sure, is in the books.
Well, you know what McKenna had, speaking about Terrence here, because, again, he's long gone in the physical sense, but Dennis is still with us. But Terrence, although I think the brothers actually traveled together and carried out a lot of their field work as ethnobotanists, but Terrence McKenna, had essentially postulated, first of all, we have to look at ancient cultures and what appeared to be not only the totems of ancient culture and literally the institution of columns and pillars and things like that, especially in ancient Greece, but also the formation of this architectural facet alongside the institution of cattle cults and things like that. Why? And even today, in so many religions, are cows. We have that expression, what is your sacred cow? And think about that. There are so many references to cattle as being sacred animals. The bovine, what about the bovine is so sacred? Is it because it is the giver of milk or the provider of meat, at least as far as the butcher shop goes? Or could it be that there's something else? And so I think one of the early theories that McKenna and others have proposed over the years involves the notion that literally humankind during the process and throughout the process of domestication of cattle, when we were living alongside these creatures, think about it, where do magic mushrooms grow? Where, psilocybin being the active ingredient here, where do the popular magic mushrooms grow? They grow in cow fields, on cow pies. And so the idea had been that early on, early humans who were probably omnivorous to an extent, opportunistic feeders, would come across mushrooms growing in fields where cattle were being herded, and they thought, well, we'll give it a shot, and they try eating these things, and boom! And there's this incredible entheogenic experience, which was not only mind-altering, but maybe even, to an extent, mind-expanding and consciousness-expanding. Now think about this, too. Now, this is what's really interesting, and this is something else that McKenna talked about. When you look at the molecular structure of mushrooms, there's what's typically called a 5-pyrrole indole molecule, I believe, and I think that McKenna pointed out that a lot of fungi, if not the majority of them, or maybe all of them, have what is called a 4-pyrrole indole. I'll talk about this in the book. And McKenna says that everything about the odd differential between most matter, most organic compounds on Earth versus mushrooms on the molecular level, and the differences between the two, everything about mushrooms screams that they are artificially manufactured. And furthermore, mushroom spores can exist and sometimes do so for long periods, maybe indefinitely, in the vacuum of space. They could conceivably travel maybe on a space rock, survive the turmoil and the absolute extremities of travel through the vacuum throughout space, land on planet Earth, and still sprout into fungi. And so McKenna's theory had been that, for all we know, mushrooms could be, although apparently biological, but different from other kinds of biology here on planet Earth. They could be something that is essentially organic but inorganic outside of Earth, and therefore something that was perhaps manufactured and sent to us as a veritable substance that would serve the same purpose as essentially the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey. We touch it, it brings intelligence, and it brings a wild and bold new reality to humankind, and very well could have been, if the stoned ape theory is of any merit, it could have been the very acting factor introduction to humankind and expansive visionary trips with psilocybin mushrooms, that could have been the very instigating factor in the expansion of consciousness that led to abstract thinking and then eventually the rudiments of human culture. So we may have everything to owe to mushrooms, at least according to McKenna. Fascinating stuff.
Very fascinating. Isn't DMT even one molecule away from tryptophan or something like that?
Yeah, they're close chemical cousins. They really are. Yeah, dimethyltryptamine, again, you have a lot of different things that are produced in the body that chemically are very similar to one another. Tryptophan, of course, which is an enzyme that's brought into the body, for instance, when you eat turkey meat and things like that, and it contributes to the wanting to take a nap after you eat turkey. But also, it's chemically similar to melatonin just as well. And there are so many different little syntheses that can occur within the body. Serotonin, in fact, which directly regulates mood and governs people's attitudes and mood and whatnot, is also chemically similar. And what's interesting is that serotonin governs mood and certain things like that. Melatonin governs sleep and sex drive, all these kinds of things. Tryptophan, of course, being a tryptamine, I suppose, that is synthesized from proteins when you consume meat and all these different kinds of things. None of these things seem to have the powerful visionary capacity that dimethyltryptamine does. And yet they're almost chemically, they're literally, maybe a couple of, what is it called, a hydroxyl molecule? I'm not sure specifically about, every aspect of the molecular function here. I'm not a cell microbiologist or a chemist or anything along those lines, but I can certainly tell you that chemically DMT is similar to melatonin, serotonin, and a number of other different things that are present in the body. And that's probably what's most unique about DMT, is that it is probably the most powerful hallucinogen known to man, and it's also it's kind of revered for being or having such a visionary capacity. McKenna talked about it just as well in talking about going into the DMT hyperspace and finding this to be a kind of reality that's more real than the real reality, and that it's inhabited. But DMT is also very much something that is produced right within our own bodies. And so how is it that it's illegal? Think about this. It's an illegal substance that's produced within your body. And so the theory is, and this is what McKenna and Dr. Richard Strassman and many others over the years have talked about, could dimethyltryptamine be something that, if the right metabolic pathways were induced within the body, that an endogenous release of it, in other words, an internal release of dimethyltryptamine, DMT, could that occur within the body? And could people who maybe are focused, transcendental meditation experts and people who focus on meditation and, raising their vibration or altered states of consciousness and inducing those states, could people who are adept at this kind of transcendental science, if you will, could those people literally be instigating a release of dimethyltryptamine, a powerful hallucinogen that alters their state of mind within their body, and something that is nonetheless also, when induced externally, is extremely illegal and potentially dangerous? It's really it's really almost more bizarre than fiction.
Yeah, like, you cannot make shit like that up. It's one in a million. I think I've never gone down that road, but I'm really, like, these last couple of years I've been really on the fence.
There's a lot of I think there's an increased awareness about that in our culture right now too. I'm interested to see where that's going to go in the next 5 or 10 years. There's so many people going down to Peru now. I have a few friends of mine that are going down there, and it seems to be expanding the consciousness to some sort of our culture right now.
It certainly does, and I think that, without getting, I'm not opposed to the New Age approach to things. Hillary Ramo, another talk show host, had recently asked me about, how I connected to the spiritual, and I said, it's a funny question, and I'm not asked that a whole lot. Now, Graham and I personally have, discussed this a bit, when we've been hanging out at conferences and things like that. But for me, I think that I've got a hyper-analytical kind of mode of thought, which is entirely scientific and really largely skeptical, if not entirely skeptical. There are some days where I wake up and I think there's no way that there's anything paranormal about ghosts. There's nothing paranormal about UFOs or cryptozoology. And I may not go so far as to say that, to borrow the old skeptical adage, of modern skepticism, that, people just make stuff up. I nonetheless am very skeptical of a lot of the strange phenomenon. Then there is the spiritual side, where I say maybe all these things exist, but it has more, again, to do with, if not the limitations of human perception, maybe it has more to do with variances from individual to individual in the ability to perceive this or that or anything from person to person. And that maybe we all do perceive reality on slightly different levels of perception, relative still within the grand scheme of things, relative to humanity on the whole, but nonetheless, each human could have slightly different, capabilities, which may bring into question such things as ESP, altered states of consciousness, God knows what else, and at times also things that are medically defined as being mental illness just as well. Mm-hmm. So, looking at all those kinds of things, I think, really, and coming back around to what Hillary Ramo had said, my response to her question was, I look at it like this. I have two aspects of my own individual, my hyper-analytical, skeptical, scientific side, and then there's my spiritual side. And those can exist alongside one another just like separate operating systems on partitions on one hard drive, if you will.
Do you think so? It's not hard to separate sometimes, though?
It is.
No, well, I think that's the next step of evolution, is finally being able to separate those things. And you see more and more of it every day. I don't know the best way to go about it, but you kind of see a lot of people who are a lot closed-minded, even like religious groups. And like the perfect example is the Catholic Church coming out and saying it's okay if there's UFOs. Right. There's like a global shift to acceptance to almost every avenue right now, be it meditation or even ayahuasca. I mean, shit like that is 10 years ago they wouldn't let you hear about that, which is another thing that can only be attributed to the internet and the spread of free information.
Yeah, and this gets in a bit into the realm of what we had discussed a little bit earlier off the microphone, which was, it is an exciting time. In the recent book that I've written, the UFO Singularity, I talk about how technology will, I think, better our attempts at reconciling with strange phenomena around us. Now, I specifically gear that subject matter in that book toward ufology, but I think that applies to a variety of different kinds of strange phenomena. Mm-hmm. And if anything, I think that really, again, this is an incredibly exciting time because, something that we were talking about, Darren and I think earlier, was that we can use an iPhone. You can take a smartphone, you can download apps onto your smartphone that allow you to track everything from satellites to the International Space Station, to other different kinds of natural phenomena, weather systems and things like this. In other words, we're getting very close to being able to carry little scientific multi-detectors around in our pockets that are constantly, invariably connected to the World Wide Web, which is really kind of like a matrix, if you will, that connects all humans to one another. Before long, and this gets into the realm of the singularity discussion here, when we have direct brain-to-computer interfaces, or rather we have a little connection, or better yet, a Wi-Fi connection that is made between our brains and the devices carried around in our phone, do we need the phone? Is the phone going to be a little miniaturized computational component that we wear on our wrist, or better yet, it's implanted somewhere in us, and we communicate directly via what we would call today telepathy with that, and we can communicate telepathically utilizing that electronic medium with people around us or people on the other side of the world. I might decide that I want to communicate with my implant and contact Darren, halfway across the world and say, Grimes, wake up! Yeah,
I want mine to be a ring. So, remember, the old school fucking Hercules commercials where he, holds up his ring and, the rings pop off the top of it?
Yeah.
That's what I want. That'll be mine. I don't need an implant. Just give me a big old Hercules ring.
Well, we're getting close, however you want it to manifest. We're getting close to having that kind of technology. And that's both exciting, but it's also terrifying. I'm someone who's recently been bitching a lot about the what I perceive as being the police state, okay, or the surveillance state. I got rear-ended 3 weeks ago, and I called traffic or rather highway patrol, and literally I'd been returning from a gig because a lot of folks who follow my work, they know I'm a musician as well, and I was returning from a wedding. I was rear-ended, and the guys hit and run. They basically slammed into me, and they took off. And so I followed them because there were no witnesses. There was nobody else on the road, and except for the car in front of us, which happened to be my brother and the bass player. So I follow these guys, get their license tag information. I call my brother, and he manages. As soon as he gets on the interstate just ahead of us, these guys swerve around him. They're trying to get away pretty quickly, and they follow and confirm the license tag number. So I had witnesses. I got their license information and thought, okay, well, if they have insurance, I'll report them. I call the highway patrol and file a report, and I basically get slapped on the wrist for not calling 911 and being a citizen slave, and sitting there and waiting for them to show up and have me fill out a questionnaire in the rain while the bad guys, quote unquote, got away. And I said,
do nothing about it.
And do nothing about it. And I said, folks, with all due respect, if I hadn't followed them and done what I did and gotten witness corroboration, I couldn't have proven what happened. And they said, well, okay, sure. We'll have somebody call you here in a few minutes. And, of course, they never called back. And after follow-ups, I was never able to get them to even to return my phone calls to formalize the complaint, even though I had information about people who had caused damage to property for me. So all that to say, I recognize the concerns that people have with a quote-unquote surveillance/police state in which, the citizenry is basically monitored and even at times harassed. And boy, I tell you, the officer that gave me the speeding ticket yesterday, and yes, that really happened, that guy, he literally laughed when I said, but officer, I was going the same speed as everybody else. In fact, the person in the car with me said the same thing. He was going the same speed as everybody else. He laughs and he goes, well, that doesn't change the fact that you're going faster than the speed limit, and he pulls me over and gives me a ticket. When you're not, when it conveniences the state, if you will, if it's a convenience to them, yeah, you'll get pulled over and fined, and then your appearance in court and the court fees that you pay will go towards the judge's tenure or whatever, or not tenure, but his retirement fund or whatever. It's wonderful how that works, and how when you are in a position where you need help, they won't do jack for you. But if you have stepped out of line, by God, they're quick to tell you that you've done it. And so I recognize the concerns that would arise around the spread of technology for purposes of misuse, because even without singularity-style technologies, I feel that we are in a state in America, and of course you guys, I don't believe that you're in America right now, but we'll say North America at the very least, wherever you are in the world. Surveillance and the police state, things are very different from how they used to be, and it's getting to a point where we have to really take into consideration, in the Orwellian context, whether there is an overreach of power by our governments. I'm not someone who advocates violence. I'm not a person who advocates fringe views per se, but I think I'll nonetheless speak out and say, I get really upset when the servants of the public aren't serving the public, they're harassing the public, and when you need them to do a damn thing for you, they won't do it. That's a problem. So when you implement technology that furthers the reach of a potentially tyrannical government, yeah, there are certainly problems. And that said, I don't want to come across as someone, when I talk about singularity and the advancements of technology, although I'm very optimistic, and I try to be optimistic about all this and say it's going to be good, and there are a lot of potentials to gain, I realize, and I'm not so naive as to think that there are not downfalls just as well, and that we should be incredibly wary just as well of synthetic telepathy or technologies that could literally bridge those gaps between human thought, that is shared on a nonverbal level, or anything else that would extend beyond natural levels of human perception.
Yeah, that's why I think the singularity is such a perfect term for it, because, I think what they define it basically as the point at which we can't see past.
Yeah, the creation of intelligence that exceeds human intelligence. But Werner Vinge had been the science fiction writer who, in 1983, I believe, had coined the term technological singularity, and he had been evoking a similar terminology that is used for the event horizon of a black hole, after which our beyond this point, if you will, our concept of physics breaks down. And so what Vinge had talked about had entailed a point beyond which we could not conceptualize, and much the same technological singularity of the coming decades, the creation of artificial intelligence and a world of synthetic intelligences and perhaps even elements of synthetic reality that extend beyond human perception and natural levels of human intelligence. It's very much an event horizon, and beyond that, we cannot conceptualize where humankind as we know it today will fit into that grand scheme of things. So, yeah, it is very much a singularity, and you're right, Darren. That's the perfect term for it.
Yeah, it's so fucking perfect because not only is it all of that, it's also the point of which there is, in my view anyway, no return. It's going to get to a point that we're not in control of it anymore.
Well, most certainly.
So with the technology of what's in the black world being, like they say, 30, 40 years ahead of what's in the commercial world, how close do you think? I mean, singularity could be nearer than we think.
Yeah, Graham, you're absolutely 100% right. See, that's the whole thing, is that the leading futurologists of today talk about this technological singularity and say we're a couple of decades away, whereas, and I think a lot of people try and discount the idea of there being a world of black budgets, black ops, black projects, and things that are privately funded. Look, let's just look at it. I'm going to get way out there for a minute here. There's money that goes missing from the U.S. budget on an annual basis, and despite the fact that trillions of dollars, and despite the fact that the IRS, as we now know, can spy on groups who, and it's not just liberal or conservative. They're also the IRS was also. Basically, they've been, to date, they've only been smacked on the wrist, if that, for spying also on educational groups and any kind of groups, right, left, center, anything that express, discontentment with government. We've seen the Department of Justice under Eric Holder in the United States watching the Associated Press, watching Fox News, watching other news agencies. And not only watching people who work for those agencies, but the family members of people who work for those news agencies. We've got the Benghazi situation over there where we allegedly have been lied to about what was actually going on, and people were going on the Sunday talk shows after, the official information about Benghazi was coming out, despite the fact that intelligence officials who were going on the Sunday shows, I believe Susan Rice was the actual individual by name to mention here, who had gone on and said that a YouTube video had sparked unrest in the Arab world. Contrary to that, she had been briefed prior to going on those television programs that there was no video that had spiked this, and that this was, in fact, a group of extremists. And I actually downloaded the New York Times best-selling report on Benghazi, which Matthew Van Dyke. I guess you would call him a soldier of fortune. He is right now involved in the Syria conflict, and he had been in Libya before that. He was an informant to that. And it's funny because when we went on the Gralien Report and we talked about those three things, Matthew Van Dyke started following us on Twitter shortly thereafter. Again, technology is connecting aspects of the world and people and individuals around the world in ways that it never did beforehand. But all that to say, where I'm going with that is that people don't think that there isn't hubris politically and socially, and that these individuals and these people in areas of government don't withhold information or outright lie to individuals, target specific groups and individuals. Just for having a conversation like this tonight, guys, and thinking outside the box, if we talk about things like dimethyltryptamine, altered states of consciousness, UFOs, and black budgets, you're going to end up on somebody's list, and that's just, and that's, I don't think that's.
That's probably why my fucking recorder isn't working.
I'm telling you, I don't think it's beyond the pale. I don't think it's absolute absurdity to assert those kinds of things. And anyone who says, do you really think there are black budgets, I'll tell you right now, in addition to the money that goes missing from government, in addition to the lies that we are fed, as I've outlined just a few instances of right here, and in addition to the the historical precedent set for ties between organized crime and government operations, racketeering, covert ops, wars and other...
The drug war.
Yeah, and wars and military conflicts, especially on part of the United States, that are waged outside the jurisdictions of official constitutional declaration of war. If you really want me, and this is my rebuttal to people who say, you really believe in black budget? Well, I would say, do you really expect me to believe, based on what I know and the historical precedents that we already have at our disposal, that there isn't a black budget? And furthermore, do you not, and I'll tell you this, I think a lot of the black budget, in truth, goes into aspects of what we perceive as paranormal phenomena at times, whether it be, from clandestine aircraft and different kinds of secret projects that involve highly advanced physics and avionics and things like that, to, maybe more mundane, everyday political engineering. I mean, there are aspects of our reality that, as we know it, that are completely and fully and totally engineered. And
here's my theory on the black budget.
Sure.
Everybody's got a black budget. Every fucking person on my street has a black budget. You know what my black budget is? Cigarettes and grass. That's the shit that I buy that I try and hide from everybody else. So if I've got a black budget, I'm sure Graham's got a black budget. I'm sure Micah's got a black budget. Some guys have their whiskey. Some guys have this, down the line.
Whether it be something.
If everyone else has a black budget, why wouldn't the government?
In other words, yeah, you're almost evoking the idea of the sin tax, or maybe not so much a sin tax, but essentially, Grandma you don't want Grandma to know that you drink liquor, and so you don't tell Grandma that you buy liquor, but you buy, copious amounts of it. Much the same, the world governments don't want us to know that they're doing this, and this with the left hand, and so they show us only what the right hand is doing. And again, there's a very selective release of information through Freedom of Information Act requests and things like this. And that's the whole thing, is that I think, to bring this into the realm of ufology, again, so to speak, I think that it's important to ask questions. A lot of people have criticized me for going after Richard French, for instance, who had, again, given testimony at the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure. They've gone after me for criticizing French. And well, actually, I haven't really been critical of him. I've just said, based on what he says, he's making some extraordinary claims. Where is the information that backs this up? And so after going and looking for it, he said he worked for Project Blue Book. Well, the Blue Book files were released decades ago. They are maintained in their entirety online. So if that's where he said he went and that's where he said that he worked, why not go and look at those files and try and find information that corroborates with what he said? And yet, would you believe that there have been people who have attacked me and said, "You idiot, you dumb ass"? Seriously, Micah Hanks, you are a moron, and here's why. Because if you think that this guy working for a secret element of the government is going to have files that were released that tell every little bit about what he did, then you're a dumbass. I mean, and that's the whole thing. Is I'm thinking, but he said he worked for Blue Book. If he said he worked for Blue Book, then are we doing ourselves a disservice by spending the time to go and look and see if the files are where he essentially basically just told us that they were and where we'd find them? Hello? And so, now granted, I don't discount the fact that there are going to be aspects that are, whether it be to, with regard to black budgets or secret covert ops, government projects, Project Blue Book, UFO, whatever. I think a lot is kept from the general public. A lot is withheld indefinitely and never released. But to presume that that's the case without going and looking is just intellectual stupidity. It's limiting yourself, and basically it's if anything, it's laziness on terms of, well, I'm going to assume that I know the answer without actually going and doing the research. Get up off your ass and go do the damned research, and don't sit there and call people stupid who actually we're going to go, guys like me, I'm going to sit there and pour through literally hundreds of pages of Blue Book documents relative to the year that at least we, as best we were able to determine, that French claimed that he had this encounter. I go and I do that because, I'm sorry, if somebody says that they work for the federal government, I'm going to go try and find documentation on them. And if that person says they work for the government and there's no documentation on them, then I'm going to ask one of two questions. Are they a fraud, or is there a secret project? And you know what? The further inquiry based on those two questions will probably lead to one or two revelations, and then we'll know exactly what quantity we're dealing with. But, the absence of any proof for a quantity does not substitute the lack of evidence for another. And the lack of evidence for one cannot be used as proof for another. It goes both ways. In this instance, we can't assume that, well, if French was a debunker working on UFOs, then there's not going to be any stuff, and therefore we have to take his word. No bullshit. Go read the damn UFO reports that were actually released by Project Blue Book and see if they corroborate with what he said he was doing when he worked for Blue Book. That's the way that you go about it if you're going to be a researcher.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
back to...
Well, I think we should take a quick break here, actually. You guys mind if we take a 2-minute break?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay, guys, we'll be right back with more from Micah Hanks. And we're back with more with author Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, author of Magic, Mysticism, and Molecule, and the UFO Singularity. Graham, I believe you had a couple of things lined up for Micah.
Yeah, I want to try and word these intelligently, but first of all, I want to mention, too, you've reinvigorated my interest in Jacques Vallée's book Dimensions, which I actually noticed I've had it on my bookshelf since my dad bought it in the late 80s, so I can't wait to get into that.
Oh, wow.
And I also like how you quoted all these quotes I haven't heard yet from Hynek and Vallée. There's a lot of new stuff in your book. So I had a question or a comment about, I loved how you talked about how the standard of our intelligence is changing. Like, it used to be remembering dates or formulas or whatever. Now that's becoming no longer relevant. Like, it's almost more meaningful now to be able to know how to locate little bits of data and facts and to be able to string that together into meaningful threads of info.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I remember listening to a news report that talked about how American physics universities, as opposed to teaching students to remember certain equations, are now working on teaching them how to find scientific information about equations and resources online. And rather than having students go and listen to like a lecture and then go home and read something based on the lecture, they reverse that process, and they'll have students go do a reading. And then when they come to school, rather than attending a lecture, there's more of an open discussion based on the reading, and they answer questions based on what students have read. And if students don't have questions, then they'll discuss the most interesting or the most challenging aspects of the study. So all these kinds of things are beginning to show that, I think, not just internet culture, but maybe even the accumulation of knowledge and technology itself, and the way that cumulative functions within applications of different varieties of science and communications, technology, all these kinds of things are lending to a greater database and a greater, honestly, I think that at one time you might say that a person who was adept in a certain area of science, to put things simply, could learn basically all that there was to know according to conventional scientific models and understandings. Today there is so much, and there have been so many people who have worked as pioneers in different fields. There's no way that a single individual can know all there is to know about a certain field of science. And so the best that individual can do is they can learn the rudiments of that and then know where to go to look to find the information. And so the literal structure of our educational systems has had to change to account for the fact that we have a growing body of technology that exceeds, I guess, the fundamental limitations of what a human mind can retain, and what a person, based on their innate individual abilities, biologically speaking, that they can learn and amass in a lifetime. So what happens when, again, in a post-singularity world, we are utilizing brain-computer interfaces, that allow us to maybe take certain information in and then store it on a hard drive that we can basically plug ourselves into and randomly access anytime we need to. We're looking at a different kind of a future, but, again, I think that we're seeing the precursors to that in the way that the education system is fundamentally changing to account for the tremendous amount of data that we have at our disposal.
Mm-hmm. And then speaking of the technological increase over the last little while, being interested in UFOs and the singularity, it's hard not to notice the huge coincidence of the modern UFO era sort of being linked or in parallel with our real increase in technology in the last 60, 70 years. It
is difficult to deny that there's a connection there. I think that what we obviously see, it's funny because I think that a lot of people, modern UFO researchers, and at one time what's funny is just within the last couple of years I looked at it very much the same. if these technologies represent visitors from another planet, then what we've been dealing with have effectively been, the technologies that, or rather intelligences, technological civilizations maybe, we, I guess, could say as easily as anything, that have taken interest in our own nuclear proliferation. At some point along the line, I was talking about how pivotal the period of World War II was. At some point along the line, it seems that we began to look at things a lot differently. And rather than there being perhaps an intelligence that took interest in us, it could very well be that we took interest in an intelligence, although we didn't realize that that's what we were doing. And the reason I point out the World War II years is because during that period we began to really, really, really increase our use of and our practical applications for radar systems, for things like that, for detection of electromagnetic fields and different kinds of non-ionizing radiation, for instance, background radiation, gamma radiation, X-rays, all different kinds of things.
Microwaves, yeah.
And so in being able to expand technologically our ability to, I put up the air quotes again, to observe our universe around us, could it be that there were technological applications that were all of a sudden allowing us to observe aspects of our reality that had been there for a long time, but that we had not been capable of perceiving directly prior to the Second World War, and prior to the innovation of different kinds of technologies that were necessitated during wartime, but which later, of course, allowed us to perceive things about the world around us that, again, we were only able to glimpse even with these, what were at the time, incredibly advanced technologies, radar systems, were survey meters and Geiger counters and things like this that allowed us, not only the visual spectra, but also access to spectrum that included, for instance, radar or electromagnetism and radiation. These sorts of things, geomagnetic, electromagnetic, whatever, artificial, natural fields. Essentially, what we did during the Second World War is that as a necessity for innovating and thus winning the conflict, we created not just, America. I'm saying that, cultures and countries, of course, all around the world that were involved in the conflict for different reasons and in different ways and with different technologies. We were all innovating different things that were applications that went toward raising human perception in different ways. And it could be that the UFO phenomenon, if we were to assume that it was something, whatever it is, that has been with us for a long time, we only at that point became aware of it, rather than utilizing new technologies that flagged the attention of an extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yeah, or at least aware of it in a different way. Yeah.
I kind of equate that to how they say, back when the fucking Spanish and them first came over to the Americas, how the natives couldn't see the ships, only the shamans could, because they just couldn't actually, their brains couldn't perceive that. You know what I mean? You guys have heard of that shit before, right?
I think that was mentioned in the film, What the Bleep Do We Really Know?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where
Which is a fascinating film, and I've been interested in that film. And I found that film to be helpful to me personally, but by the same token, I've also had more of my my friends in the more intellectual circles describe that as just being propaganda for the Rantha cult.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't buy that. I like that. I like that movie. Actually, have you heard of the new one coming out, Micah, called People versus the State of Illusion?
I haven't, but again, I would say that in terms of an educational video, that if you watch the unedited version, I thought What the Bleep Do We Know had some very useful points. I found it uplifting and enjoyable, and in this day and age, it's hard to find anything that's uplifting and enjoyable. Okay, but the new film that you mentioned, no, I haven't heard about that.
It's just coming out. The premiere's this Friday coming up, I think. So I'm gonna go to that in the university in Calgary here.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's got a lot of the same people as What the Bleep.
I was unaware that there was another film coming out. I'm gonna have to.
Is that like a sequel?
Yeah, I think it is. They don't call it that, but I'm pretty sure it's got a lot of the same things.
Sorry,
People
I'm
versus,
just distracted. It's lightning like a motherfucker all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's really dark and cloudy out there. So it's called People versus the State of Illusion.
Well, by the way, the lightning that you guys are experiencing is HARP basically trying to end this conversation.
Oh, motherfucker.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. Tornadoes down there, lightning up here.
I haven't had tornadoes here yet, but I've had some absolutely. I mean, I thought there was a werewolf outside my window. The wind was blowing so hard recently. And then, of course, in the Midwest, there'd been, tremendous tornadoes. Our hearts go out to all the folks who've sustained damage from that. But, I've had microbursts and things happen right here in Asheville, just within the vicinity of the Gralien bunker. Not underground, of course, but above ground. Our facilities have, sustained some wind damage before, so God help us.
Usually it's GMO that gets us into arguments.
GMO. Good Mama Offlanders.
Yeah, I say it's future and Graham, and actually RPJ agreed with me. So.
RPJ, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is he and I have disagreed on that. Back in the day when people had talked about genetically produced meats, I'd talked about on the show, essentially my reasons for thinking that it was a little strange, and RPJ kind of goes, no, man, he says you got to take into consideration, if we're dealing with scarcity, what I have called Petri meat, which would be genetically not only just modified, but engineered.
Fuck yeah, maybe that shit, you could just make it taste like whatever you want. Just perfect. Bam. There's good and there's bad to every argument. Just as like I've said with the UFO singularity, I'm not necessarily a proponent for what we would call technological singularity. I just don't think that you can necessarily avoid it. I think that to an extent our technological progression and even a variety of what we would call conscious evolution is almost inevitable. And I think that with regard to GMOs, it's the same sort of thing. We're dealing with a technology that's probably going to utilize what we would essentially call, it's going to utilize an end of famine, if you will, technologically speaking, and provide and offer food for people in ways that people previously have not been able to achieve or have access to. But, in the long run, it's also going to potentially cause issues, and the primary issue people have had, for instance, with the farmer assurance provision, which the deterrents to that call it the Monsanto Protection Act. They all say that as soon as you institute law that protects a company like Monsanto from any repercussions that may be incurred from on down the road, the premature use of genetically modified or genetically engineered foods, that right there, I mean, think about that. We don't know what we're feeding people. And yeah, it may. No, I agree. That's one thing, right? That's one thing actually I should mention right now, because I talked about this the last episode too, is Grimerica does not condone Monsanto in any way, shape, or form. My argument is just that I don't believe that GMO should be controlled by any corporation. But GMO, to me, in 200 years is the inevitable future. Either that, or if we don't want to curb population, and we want to stop killing animals and resources at the same time, then GMO seems to be the only alternative to me, anyway.
I think that's a wise way to look at things to an extent, because, while we are resistant to change right now, if properly implemented, in other words, once we know what we're dealing with on down the road, GMOs may not be a bad thing at all. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, my God, Micah Hanks, how dare you? But the thing is that, again, properly implemented, that technology may be very useful and safe on down the road. The problem that we have with Monsanto, and the reason I do not stand behind Monsanto, there go the MIBs again. Guys, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, somebody's there. The problem with Monsanto specifically is that before we know what we're capable of, before we know what potential harms may be incurred from the use of genetically modified or engineered foods or anything like that, we're going to go ahead and use GMOs, say to hell with what dangers may be incurred, and you know what? We're going to legislate protections so that if something bad happens, it doesn't come back to bite us on the ass, and nobody's held accountable. Furthermore, Monsanto is going to sue guys who have a plot of land next to a crop that's a Monsanto crop that gets fertilized by the wind blowing across this other guy's property, and pollinating his fields. It's absurd. Yes, that is, in my opinion, again, being a radical centrist and being probably, someone who is, if anything, really a constitutionally minded American, I still think that that's probably the epitome of the big, nasty, evil corporation. And I don't think that GMOs are bad. I think Monsanto is bad, in essence.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I have no problem with GMO. Well, I do. I guess I suppose I do at this point because the science is new, and I suppose it's unpredictable, and Monsanto is fucked up. But on a general level, I think GMOs are just a natural step in humans' evolution.
Yeah, I would agree.
Nobody likes to hear stories about how you can only have, one kid in China. You know how you heard? I'm pretty sure that shit was never true. Maybe it was, but we all have heard the horror stories before. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
And nobody wants to live that lifestyle, and nobody wants to kill all the all the apples, or for vegetarians don't want to eat all the apples or all the oranges, and they don't want us to kill all the animals, and we've already brought cows to some sort of fucked up existence. So, I mean, at what point do we have to accept the fact that what's humane is probably what's going to come out of a laboratory?
Oh, absolutely.
So one thing I wanted to mention before I forget is some of the amazing artwork by your brother and by Scotty Roberts in the book.
Well, thank you very much, and they're both incredibly talented. And I have to say, in addition to lending some of his artwork, Scotty Roberts, my compatriot, my brother, and my co-planner for the Paradigm. He's really actually the mastermind behind the Paradigm Symposium. I'm his co-planner. He's the boss. But Scotty wrote the foreword for the UFO Singularity, and he's one who claims not to really be a ufologist, and he has not followed UFO research. He will correspond with me privately about it. But it's so funny because he said, I'm not someone who's well-versed in UFO research, and yet in his book, I felt that he probably spent, if anything, Scotty really kind of encapsulated the UFO argument as well as anyone ever has. And he did it in such a way that was both eloquent and intellectual at once. And so, I was just really amazed, and I'm so glad not only to have his artistic contributions, but also his intellectual contributions just as well.
Symposium 2013. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
The Paradigm Symposium is it's again.
Save 2 tickets.
I was just going to say that.
Well,
we keep procrastinating, and I don't want to run out of.
Well, it wouldn't be the same without you guys there, and I know that for certain. So I'm getting excited. Some of the new additions this year are Robert Bivall. We've got Robert Schock. We've got, as a matter of fact, Scott Walter of the program America Unearthed. A couple of the folks who had been at Paradigm last year, who are recurring, who are the regulars, if you will.
John Ward? John
Ward, of course, who has co-authored a new book with Scotty Roberts. He's going to be there. Nick Redfern, Marie D. Jones, and Larry Flaxman will be back again. So, I'm if anything, as exciting as the first one was, I didn't think I would ever be more excited about Paradigm Symposium. But in a funny way, I think I'm more excited about this year because it's like last year we were just all out. This year, we've kind of narrowed our focus and we've gotten more serious about things, but now we really know what we're doing, and now it's really on. And I'm really so excited. If there was a good event that we came to last year and we all met and that was what was so amazing, I think, about Paradigm last year is that you, Graham, and Darren and I, we'd corresponded for a while, and you guys have been Grayley Report listeners, but we met at Paradigm, and that was a convergence of sorts, and that it happened in 2012 was symbologically significant in a lot of different other ways, but I think that was just the beginning, and so if anything, I'm more excited about Paradigm Symposium 2013 and all the things that are going to be afforded us, all the amazing wonders and insights that we'll be able to attain at this event. So, folks, you don't want to miss it. It is ParadigmSymposium.com, and tickets are on sale right now. So come on out, because I'm sure you're going to see Darren and Graham and me there.
I'll tell you one thing I'll be fucking obtaining is a fucking plane ticket. There is zero chance I'm driving.
You guys did the long haul last time.
Oh, dude, I feel sorry for Graham. I was so hungover. On the last day, he had to drive
18 hours straight, I think.
God bless him. Well, I bless you guys both, and I hope that you'll both make it back safely. And yes, if you can, fly this time. And don't spend 18 hours driving, although I'm so glad that you both did because, I got to meet you there.
Yeah, it was a great time.
So say hi to Caleb and the gang in the bunker from the guys in the igloo.
Oh, we will, and I hope that you're going to keep that tag, from the gang in the igloo, or from the what would you call it, from the intellects in the igloo. It is Grimerica, and it's been my pleasure, gentlemen, to be with you on Grimerica. Have me back sometime, and maybe we'll send some other members of the Graylian gang your way here before long. Okay.
Okay, sounds good, Micah. Thanks for stopping by.
Cosmic love, my brothers. Let's stay in touch. Miss you both.
Okay. Well, that was our chat with Micah Hanks. What a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, what a great time, and a big thanks to Micah again for saving the day with his recording equipment.
I found that really, really challenging chatting with him in a way where, like, I really was wanting to ask him more questions and interrupt him, but he was just going, like, he reminds me of this like a genius wind-up doll. You press the button and he just goes, right? So it's just like trying really hard, just let him go, because it's fascinating stuff, right?
Yeah, he definitely, I could listen to that guy talk for hours. He definitely just nonstop interesting facts and theories.
Yeah, and I love how he got into the whole police state and all that stuff too. So we got a little bit out of the UFO singularity, which is great. It all seems to kind of overlap a bit, anyways, right?
Yeah, no, it was a great chat. I don't know that you guys might have noticed that I was maybe slurring my words a little bit closer to the end of the podcast. Me and Micah had decided to share a drink, a celebratory drink at the beginning before the recording, and with all the gremlins and everything, by the time we finished the recording, I had a few too many drinks to recording podcasts, I suppose. But I held it together all right.
Yeah, barely.
Barely, yeah, definitely barely. But I suppose that should happen sometimes.
I want to talk about our emails are all set up now too, and the website. So you can email me or Darren, and mine is graham@grimerica.com. So that's GRAHAM at Grimerica.com.
Yeah, and mine's Darren at Grimerica.com. So that's DARREN. Or feedback at Grimerica.ca, which is kind of fucked up, I guess, but whatever. You guys will figure it out. And feel free to come to the site and sign up. Feel free to leave us a review on iTunes. And I definitely recommend picking up this book, the UFO Singularity, because I really enjoyed the read, and it's definitely worth the $15 or whatever it costs.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention too is Micah had some lectures at the UFO Congress. Also, he was on a panel discussion with Stanton Friedman, Richard Dolan, and it was called ufology in the 21st century. And he also had his UFO Singularity lecture. So openminds.tv will have those DVDs for sale, actually. So if anybody wants to check out that, go to the store and then click on click on UFO Congress 2013, and you can buy the DVDs there. So
yeah, okay. Yeah. That I think I've actually still got your UFO Congress, Micah Hanks.
Yeah.
And Childress, and maybe one more. I think I have 3 of them.
Yeah.
Grant Cameron.
Yeah, that's right.
Who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should have him on one day.
Grant Cameron?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be into that for sure. We do have Krypner next week, and we might sneak in Caleb Hanks before that. We'll see how it happens. See what our workload's like with the ones we've been pumping out already. But overall, there's been a pretty good ride. We've been enjoying it so far, so we won't be stopping anytime soon. I hope you guys are enjoying listening to them as much as we're enjoying making them. Sometimes it gets a little frustrating, especially with the web stuff. That fucking shit can get frustrating sometimes.
Alrighty, that's about it then, eh? See you next time.
Yep, that's it from us. We'll see you with next week. I'm not sure if our next episode out is going to be Caleb or Stanley Krypner, but it'll be out in the future, and we'll see you when we see you.